G'day and welcome to Aussievision. It's Kyriakos here, and today we have a very special guest who is behind this year's stage design for Eurovision 2023 in Liverpool. He's the founder and director of Yellow Studio based in New York and Sydney. It's Julio Himede. Welcome, Julio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we're very proud to see an Aussie take part in designing the Eurovision stage this year. And I want to start with a question about you. Now, you're of Salvadoran background and you were born and grew up in Australia. And you studied here in Brisbane, then New South Wales at NIDA. And then I believe you did start off working, I think it was as an assistant with the closing ceremony for the Sydney Olympics. Can you tell us a little bit about your Australian experience with your work?
My Australian experience with my work. I think there is a very, theatrical experience with my work. And that is because I trained as a set and costume designer at NIDA for 3 years. And I was, I had a wonderful experience dealing with so many different platforms in designing, from an opera to a play to a film to so many other, design focus platforms. So I've carried that through, throughout my career, and I moved from Sydney to New York in 2014, and I've been very fortunate to have carried, all these experiences and working still in the industry that I love, a very theatrical industry. I mainly now work on live television productions, but I also still do a theater show or a dance piece or a specific event, and that all comes from my training in Australia and my practice. So very fortunate to still be doing it.
Well, we're talking about live shows. You worked on the MTV Music Awards, the Grammys. You even worked on the American Song Contest too. But Eurovision is a very different show from all of them. I know you have to cater for 37 different performances. So what is ultimately the biggest challenge you've had to face as the set designer for Eurovision so far?
Well, as you pointed out, dealing with so many entries, so many delegations, I have worked in very large scale live broadcasting productions. And but normally, for example, on the Grammys or VMAs, we will have 13 to 18 performances, and that is tough in itself for live broadcasts. However, for Eurovision, where we have 37 delegations, 37 different creatives that we have to turn around very quickly in less than a minute, it's a very challenging logistical operation that we have to look after from the very early beginnings when we are designing. Obviously, when we're designing and we go through a whole design process of concepts and ideas and metaphors and symbols and so on, we can't really necessarily put all those logistics aside. We sort of have to have them, kind of side by side in order to be able to deliver a successful landscape that can accommodate and transform into 37 different creatives. So,
well, something I've always wanted to ask a stage designer at Eurovision is, so some performances like Conchita's Rise Like a Phoenix utilized the Eurovision stage, made use of the grand scale of that stage back in 2014 and the LED screen. So essentially the performance made use of the full potential of what the stage had to offer. But then,
yes.
and it became an integral part of the performance. But then we have other performances like Euphoria by Loreen 2012, where the stage was blacked out and the artist created their own space, universe, and used,
yes.
I think she used her own prop, her platform.
Right.
Do you have a personal preference on how an artist or delegation should be using the stage? What's your view on that?
I think it's wonderful that the artists can utilize our stage in so many different ways. I also think it's very interesting how they bring their own creative and just focus on their own little space. With a big production like Eurovision, where it's 2-3 hours long, it's really essential to see variety and and how this stage is used. And so, while Laureen might not use it necessarily, or she didn't for Euphoria. Not Euphoria. What was the song called? Sorry.
Euphoria. Yeah, Euphoria.
Okay. There are other artists who use it, and so I think it's actually quite lovely to see a whole spectrum on how it's being used. And then we as designers have to provide a lot of tricks in order to be able to accommodate, a lot of kind of that, all those changeovers, and so I think it's really great. I think I embrace it.
Now, I know you probably can't reveal too much, but what elements or experiences from the staging this year can we expect that we haven't seen at Eurovision before? Like, what can you tell us?
Well, there's a lot of lighting and technology integrated in this year's design. There's a lot of new lighting technology that we've been working very closely with the lighting designer, and so there is a blend of that kind of video and lighting in certain performances and how they're being used. I guess 95% of the architecture that I've designed with my team is made out of video, from the floor to the ceiling to the sides. So I guess even in the ceiling is a really interesting approach on how to sort of accommodate video, hanging upside down. So that's a sort of a unique take on what we are doing. There is a lot of automation in this set as well. And again, I go back to being able to transform this set into so many different, creatives. So I think one of the key things is transformation of the stage. So you will see a lot of moving pieces as part of our set. And in fact, we start rehearsals today on all that automation.
Well, when it comes to the concept, I know you opted for the hug, which is quite a universal concept, and it's so appropriate for Europe right now. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we the producers and myself and my team at Yellow Studio, when we got the job, we started a whole design journey, what I call the romantic period of designing, where we have liberty to explore all kinds of aspects about Eurovision, about the collaboration of the Ukraine and the UK. And so we went down this path of looking at and being, obviously aware of the current situation in the Ukraine. How do we identify a concept that is relatable, that brings both identities of both countries together? So, for example, from the Ukraine, we looked at craftsmanship and the symbolism of embroidery and their musical instruments, to the national flower, costume. And then in the UK, and specifically in Liverpool, we looked at elements like the rich history in music that Liverpool itself has, and the culture in Liverpool. So, we also studied poetry and architecture and all these sort of elements that make up all those identities. In the end, we sort of concluded that our concept should be, a bit more universal, and more than ever, specifically people of the Ukraine and Europe, we need a hug. And so our architecture of our set resembles a hug. As it's Liverpool, the people of Liverpool are welcoming the people of the Ukraine, the people of Europe and the world with open arms to say, we love you, here we are, let's throw this party together and let's reunite through music. And that's how we came up with our concept.
Now, another big difference this year is we're back to having a standing live audience in the arena for the first time since pre-COVID times. Did bringing back the standing audiences have an influence on the stage design?
Yes, 100%. And this is something, there was a lot of conversation about this in our process. We are thrilled to have a live audience. The energy that you capture on camera when you're watching, Eurovision around the world, that energy and that excitement really is a huge credit to a successful live event. For all of you guys watching at home, to the artists performing. because the artist performing on stage, surrounded by this energy, almost 270 degrees around you, really does feed this sort of wonderful energy to them. So it's a very special key that adds a lot of value to our production, and we're super excited to have it back finally.
Now, I know you are a fan of the contest yourself, and now that you're behind the scenes, like essentially watching how the sausage is made, and you are an integral part of it. What's your favorite part of the experience so far?
My favorite part, I think, is seeing this, seeing all the bells and whistles and the architecture come alive, that we, on how we design it. Because, us designers with my team back in New York City, sure, we talk to our producers on a daily basis and there's a lot of communication, but essentially we are designing by ourselves. In my studio, there's 5 of us at Yellow Studio. And from a pencil to a small model in the computer. And so coming to the Liverpool arena and seeing this giant, living organism come together is quite thrilling. And the scale of the show, the scale of the production, and the scale of the set is certainly massive. And so seeing everything come together, from the early beginnings of our little hand sketches, it's quite magical.
Now, we've had interesting stagings at Eurovision in the past, and Eurovision has definitely improved and pushed the boundaries when it comes to staging and lighting. Is there any inspiration you took from any past Eurovision stagings? And do you have a personal favorite from any past contests?
There are so many that I've seen over the years that I've always sort of, been, I guess, inspired by. I don't think I have a favorite one, but I've certainly always used to watch it back in Australia, because of the technology and its scale and all the tricks and certainly the performances. So I think, I have very large shoes to fill. I've been given the baton to continue it and to deliver an iconic Eurovision set design, and again, we go back to the artists performing. All those 37 artists are the protagonists of our show. They are the hero, and it is a competition and it's all about them. However, we as designers still have to design, something that when you turn the TV or your device, it has to say, this is Eurovision, right? So something bold and unique and exciting. So there's a lot of pressure, but I'm sure I'll be me and my team are able to deliver. So we're excited for you guys to see it all.
Now, lastly, I do want to ask you, what are some of your favorite Eurovision performances of all time ever, or anything that influenced you or made a big impact on you?
You know what? There are so many. And I think every year I get surprised on what I end up liking and I end up going for. But, going back to all those years ago, going back to Dana International, for example, Conchita, and most recent Maneskin's performance, was so amazing. And since they won, they perform in a couple of the other shows that I've designed as well, and they are brilliant. The energy, so and so different than Netta, for example, who I also love. There are so many, and every year I'm just very surprised at the diversity, and I think it's wonderful to see, to look back at the history and to see so much diversity being celebrated through music, because this is what the show is all about.
Well, you're a very busy man, and we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for your time and the chat, Julio. We cannot wait to see the staging of this year's contest, and thank you so much for your hard work and all the best.
Thank you for having me. All the best.
All right. See you.